Welcome to Verge File.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You'll get intimacy when I feel like it. That's all she said. 14 words, delivered with the kind of casual cruelty that tells you they've been rehearsed. No yelling, no hesitation, just finality. I was standing in our kitchen, still holding the grocery bag I'd just brought in. The fridge door hung open behind me, cold air spilling onto my back. She didn't even look up from her phone when she said it, just kept scrolling, thumb moving lazily across the glass like she was flicking away the last shred of connection between us. For a second, I didn't move. My ears buzzed. My chest tightened, but not with rage, something colder, clearer. I didn't ask her what she meant. I didn't demand an explanation. I didn't remind her of the years we'd been together or the life we'd built. I just stopped, inside, because in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about one fight, one bad week, or even a rough year. This was the pattern, a pattern I'd been ignoring for far too long. I'd been the one reaching across the gap while she stood there, arms crossed, watching me sink. And now, I was done swimming. That night, she climbed into bed without a word, her back turned toward me like always. The glow from her phone lit up the curve of her shoulder as she scrolled in silence. I stared at the ceiling, not replaying her words, but replaying the years leading up to them. The slow erosion, the casual dismissals, the way affection had become a bargaining chip instead of a gift. She thought my silence meant surrender. She didn't realize it meant strategy. The next morning, I woke before she did. No coffee for her. No casual have a good day. I left the house without making a sound. Sat in my car in the driveway, engine off, just breathing. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. At work, I kept my head down. Didn't text her, didn't check in. When I got home, she was on the couch in her robe, glass of wine in hand. Some reality show paused on the screen. "You're late," she said without looking at me. Didn't realize there was a curfew. I replied, my voice calm, almost bored. That made her glance up, just for a second. But I saw it. The flicker of something she didn't want me to see. Confusion. Maybe even unease. I cleaned up the kitchen without a word. No sighing. No muttering under my breath. Just silence. That silence was mine now. And soon, everything else would be too. She didn't know it yet, but the man she thought she could push to the edge and pull back at will had already stepped away. And I wasn't coming back. Not this time. She didn't notice at first. Maybe she thought I was just tired. Distracted. Maybe she assumed this was one of those quiet phases men go through before bouncing back into orbit around them. At breakfast, I sat across from her, scrolling through the news on my phone. No eye contact. No casual "how'd you sleep?" No offering to make her coffee the way I had every morning for years. She talked about something at work, her manager, a canceled meeting, a friend's birthday. I nodded once. Didn't smile. Didn't ask a single question. That night, I came home later than usual. Not because I was busy, but because I wanted the silence to stretch. I'd stopped rushing home, stopped giving her my evenings like they were hers by default. When I walked in, she was in a silk robe I hadn't seen in months, hair curled, wine glass ready, TV paused. "You're late," she said, tone light but eyes watching for my reaction. Didn't realize we were on a clock. I replied as I set my keys down. For a split second, her face shifted. Just a fraction. The first hint, she could feel the ground moving under her feet. I cleaned up the counter, wrappers, dishes, a half-empty takeout box, without a word. No sighs, no muttering. Just quiet, deliberate movement. The next day, she tried harder. Dinner was made before I got home. Candles lit. Pasta from scratch. She even reached for my hand across the table, letting her fingers brush mine. I pulled back, pretending I hadn't noticed. Kept eating. Thanked her for the meal, but didn't compliment it. Her smile faltered. She looked away. The shift had begun. For years, she had made distance her weapon, pulling back when it suited her, making affection conditional, then watching me scramble to earn it back. Now, she was tasting her own medicine, and she didn't like the flavor. Over the next few days, she started texting me during the day. "Hope your morning's going okay. What do you want for dinner? Miss you." I didn't ignore them. I answered, but with surgical precision. "Thanks. Doesn't matter. All good." Every word a mirror. Every short reply a reminder of the gap she'd created. By the end of the week, she was watching me like she was trying to decode a foreign language. I could feel her searching for signs, jealousy, irritation, anything that meant I still revolved around her. But she didn't understand yet. This wasn't a game I was playing to win her attention. This was a door closing, one slow inch at a time. And when it finally shut, it wouldn't open again. The first cuts had been made. She just hadn't realized she was bleeding. The thing about pulling away is that it's rarely loud. It's not slammed doors or shouting matches. It's a slow, deliberate drift. And I made sure mine was impossible to stop once it started. I began waking up earlier than her, earlier than I needed to for work. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because I couldn't stand the tension of those mornings anymore. The way she'd come into the kitchen without a word, glance past me like I was part of the furniture. So I left before I had to see it. I'd sit in my car with a coffee, just breathing in the quiet. It felt cleaner than anything in that house. At the office, I threw myself into the gym during lunch breaks. At first it was just to fill the time, but soon I remembered what it felt like to feel strong again. My clothes started fitting better. I carried myself differently. People noticed, colleagues, strangers, even the barista at the cafe near work. They looked at me like I existed, like I was visible. I wasn't chasing anyone new. This wasn't about replacing her. This was about reclaiming the version of me I'd let fade while I kept trying to hold something together that she'd already dropped. A week into my new routine, she finally commented. I'd just come back from the gym, still in workout clothes, when she looked up from the couch. "You've been out a lot lately." "Yeah," I said simply. "With who?" "Just people." Her eyes narrowed. Not because she had proof of anything, but because she knew nothing about my world anymore. And that was new. For years, she'd been the gatekeeper of information, deciding what I needed to know. Now, she was on the outside, and the glass was one way. I started making small financial moves next. Nothing dramatic, nothing she could accuse me of. I canceled a few subscriptions she never used, but I paid for. Rerouted part of my paycheck into a separate account in my name only. Quiet, clean steps toward independence. She didn't notice right away, but the cracks began to spread. The Netflix login failed one night. She called from the living room. "Something's wrong with the account." I didn't answer. She waited for me to fix it. I didn't. I wasn't withdrawing to punish her. I was dismantling a system she thought was permanent, brick by brick, without a single raised voice. And in the evenings, I stayed polite, calm, helpful even, but I was no longer hers. I'd stopped orbiting her, stopped making her the center of my decisions. She could feel it now, not in the obvious ways, but in the subtle, suffocating absence of control. And I knew, once a person feels that shift, they'll do almost anything to get it back, which is exactly what I was counting on. I knew the moment she felt it, really felt it. It wasn't a scene. No screaming. No accusations. It came in the form of a call in the middle of the day. Something she never did unless it was urgent. Her voice was lighter than usual, forced in a way that almost sounded playful. "Just wanted to hear your voice," she said. I let the pause stretch. "Everything okay?" "Yeah. Just missed you, I guess." I didn't return the sentiment. I let the silence breathe until she let out a nervous laugh and said, "Anyway, I'll let you go." She hung up before I could. That told me everything. It wasn't affection driving that call. It was fear. Fear that the distance she thought she controlled was now beyond her reach. That night, I came home even later. She was dressed like we had plans. Heels, a fitted dress, hair done. We didn't. "There's this new place I've been wanting to try," she said quickly, like the words had been sitting in her mouth all day. "Figured we could go, maybe just talk a bit." "I already ate," I said, removing my jacket and hanging it neatly on the hook. For half a second, her expression slipped. The confidence cracked, replaced by something raw. She covered it quickly. "Oh, that's fine. Maybe tomorrow then." "Maybe," I replied and walked upstairs. 2 days later, I tightened the financial net. I'd already moved part of my income into a private account, but now I began setting up a separate credit line. I canceled another handful of recurring charges, things that benefited her, not us. The first ripple hit on a Thursday evening. "The Amazon Prime isn't working," she called out from the living room. "I know," I said from the kitchen. "Well, are you going to fix it?" "No." The silence after that was thick. She didn't argue, didn't push, but I could feel the shift in the air, the quiet recalibration of someone realizing the ground is no longer under their feet. By now, she was watching me differently. Her eyes followed me when I moved through the house. She listened for my tone in the smallest comments. She tested little moments of physical contact, brushing my arm in the hallway, standing too close in the kitchen. I stepped aside every time. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't distant out of spite. I was simply unavailable. Emotionally, physically, strategically. And I knew that was far more dangerous than anger. Anger can be argued with, soothed, negotiated. But absence? Absence is impossible to fight. And she was only just beginning to realize that she was already losing. By the third week, the silence had stopped being just my shield. It had become a mirror. And she was starting to see herself in it, whether she wanted to or not. Her little tests grew bolder. One evening, she came into the living room wearing lingerie I hadn't seen in years. No words, just a slow walk toward the couch where I was reading. I didn't even look up until she was standing in front of me. "Do you like it?" she asked. I closed the book, set it on the coffee table, and said, "Looks like it fits." Then I got up and went to the kitchen. When I came back, she was gone. The TV was on, but the volume was low. I could hear her moving around upstairs, drawers opening and closing a little too hard. The next day, she tried another angle, nostalgia. She suggested we go to the cafe we used to visit every Sunday morning. I told her I already had plans. I didn't mention what they were, and she didn't ask. Not because she didn't want to know, but because she wasn't sure she could handle the answer. In reality, my plans were a solo hike an hour out of town. No phone reception, no witnesses, just me, the trees, and the knowledge that every mile I walked made the distance between us something physical as well as emotional. When I got home that evening, she was waiting at the kitchen counter, glass of wine in hand. "You're never home anymore," she said. "I'm here now," I replied, passing her to put my keys down. She followed me into the living room, hovering like she wanted to say more. Instead, she just sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling on her phone but not really looking at it. That night, I started sleeping on the far edge of the bed. Not because we'd fought, not because I was making a scene, but because I genuinely didn't feel the need to be near her anymore. And I made sure she felt that space in every inch of the mattress. I noticed her watching me more closely after that. Not just when I was home, but when I was getting ready to leave. Her eyes tracking what shirt I picked, how I styled my hair, what time I walked out the door. It wasn't love. It was surveillance born from insecurity. The power she thought she had was leaking away, and she couldn't stop it. Every move I made was subtle. Every withdrawal was quiet. But each one chipped at the foundation she'd been standing on for years. And soon, I knew, that foundation would collapse entirely. I just had to keep removing the bricks, one silent, deliberate gesture at a time. The unraveling stopped being private the day it bled into her social circle. Up until then, my silence had been something only she felt. Now, other people were starting to notice, and that was far more dangerous for her than anything I could have said. It began with a dinner at her sister's place. We hadn't been over there in months, but this time she insisted. I could tell she wanted an audience, maybe even a little public reset. I went along, calm and polite, the perfect picture of composure. Around the table, conversation drifted easily at first, her sister talking about work, her brother-in-law telling some story about their kid. Then her sister glanced at me and said, "You've been quiet lately." I smiled slightly, just focusing on things that matter. The room shifted. It wasn't a loaded statement, but it didn't need to be. Her sister's eyes flicked to her, then back to me, like she'd just caught a crack in the paint that no one was supposed to see. On the drive home, she didn't speak. Not because she was angry at me, though she probably was, but because she knew I hadn't broken any rules. I hadn't made a scene. I hadn't embarrassed her. I'd simply let someone else notice the distance she had created. A few days later, one of her friends stopped me at the grocery store. We exchanged the usual small talk until she said, "Everything good between you two? You just seem different." I gave her the same quiet smile. "I guess I am." That night, she asked if I'd been talking to her friends about us. I told her no. I didn't need to. People could see it for themselves. It was the first time I saw her truly unsettled. Not angry, not defensive, just off balance. Because control, for her, had always relied on keeping the outside perception intact. As long as everyone thought we were fine, she could frame the truth however she wanted. Now, she was realizing she no longer controlled the narrative. I deepened the shift by pulling back from mutual events. Work gatherings, family get-togethers, casual drinks with friends. I attended selectively, always calm, always composed. When I was there, I was present but detached, not orbiting her, not filling in her pauses. The more people saw it, the more she had to explain it without exposing herself. And every explanation made the cracks a little more visible. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't trying to ruin her image. I was simply removing myself from the role that had kept it alive. And she was starting to realize that without me propping it up, the image couldn't stand on its own. The silence between us was no longer just in our house. It was following her everywhere. And that's when I knew the collapse had already started. By the time the fourth week rolled in, she had stopped pretending nothing was wrong. Her tone was different now, less certain, more measured. She still tried to hold her posture, but there was a flicker of hesitation in every word. I noticed it most on Sunday mornings. We used to spend them together, lingering over breakfast, trading plans for the week. Now, she came into the kitchen late, hovering like she wasn't sure if she should speak first. When she did, it was safe, neutral questions. Do you need anything from the store? What are you doing today? I kept my answers short. Not sharp, not dismissive, just factual. I wanted her to feel the absence of warmth without the satisfaction of a fight. Her attempts to draw me back and started looking like moves on a chessboard she didn't understand anymore. She'd suggest dinner at places I used to like. I'd politely decline. She'd try to show interest in my day. I'd give her nothing to latch onto. And I could see the frustration building, not the kind that bursts into an argument, but the kind that slowly drains a person. One night, I came home to find her sitting on the couch in near darkness, TV off, wine untouched on the table. She said, "We don't talk anymore." I looked at her for a moment. "We used to. You just weren't listening." She didn't reply, and for the first time, I saw her look away not in defiance, but because she couldn't hold my gaze. That week, I made my absence more tangible. I started staying later at the gym, taking weekend trips out of town under the guise of clearing my head. I never said where exactly I went. She never asked, though I knew she wanted to. The space between us was no longer just emotional. It was physical, and it was growing. And with every mile I put between us, I felt lighter. I'd walk into the house after being gone for hours and see her eyes flick up, scanning me like she was trying to read a code she no longer had the key for. But the truth was, there was no code. There was just nothing left for her to read. The people she might have confided in were quiet now. Whether out of discomfort or because they'd seen enough to understand, no one was rushing to reassure her. She was starting to realize she was alone in this. Not because I'd abandoned her, but because she'd burned every bridge she thought she could retreat to. Isolation isn't loud. It's not an announcement. It's a slow realization that no one is standing behind you anymore. And by then, she was standing in silence, with nothing but the echo of her own choices. It happened on a Thursday night. I just walked in from the gym, dropped my bag by the door, and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. She was waiting at the counter, not dressed up, not casual, just standing there like she'd been rehearsing whatever was about to come out of her mouth. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't sit down. "About what?" "About us," she replied, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months. "You've been different." I let the pause stretch. "Have I? You barely speak to me. You're always out. I feel like you're somewhere else all the time." I took a slow sip of water. "Maybe I am." Her eyes searched my face, looking for something familiar. "If I've done something." I cut her off, not with words, but with silence. It wasn't sharp or defensive, it was final. She stepped closer, trying to close the gap, her hand reaching out to touch my arm. I didn't move away, but I didn't acknowledge it either. Her fingers lingered for a second, then slipped back when it was clear the contact meant nothing to me. "You used to care," she said quietly. "I used to try," I answered. The air in the room changed. She realized then that this wasn't about winning an argument or smoothing over a fight. This was about something that had already ended. She was just now seeing it. I walked past her, set my glass in the sink, and started upstairs. "Is there someone else?" she called after me. I stopped halfway up the stairs. "No, there's just me now." I didn't wait for a reply. That night, She knocked on the bedroom door before coming in, a first. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to talk about vacations we'd taken, memories we'd shared. I responded with nods, short words, nothing more. She wanted to anchor herself to the past, but I'd already cut the rope. By morning, she was quieter. Not the cold silence she used to give me when she wanted to punish me, but the silence of someone realizing punishment wouldn't work anymore. She had lost the one thing she thought was permanent, my investment. And now, the only thing left for her to do was try to survive in the space I'd created, a space where my presence was no longer a given and my attention was no longer hers to claim. She had wanted control. Now she was living in the exact moment she'd never prepared for, a life where I wasn't playing the game at all. The final unraveling didn't come in one big explosion. It came in small implosions, one after another, until there was nothing left to hold her together. It started when she got a call from a mutual acquaintance. I don't know what was said, but I saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes darted to me like she'd been caught in something. She didn't share the details. She didn't need to. I already knew the walls were closing in. That week, I attended a work event without her for the first time in years. I didn't tell her until the day of. When I walked out the door, she stood there in the kitchen, hair half done, makeup untouched, like she'd been preparing to join me, but never got the invitation. I didn't look back. The pictures from the event made their way onto social media. A few of my colleagues posted group shots. Me in the middle, suit pressed, smiling just enough to be polite. I wasn't with anyone in the photos, but I didn't need to be. The image of me looking sharp, confident, and separate from her was enough to feed the whispers. By the weekend, I could feel her unraveling. She hovered in rooms I was in, starting sentences she didn't finish. She lingered in the doorway when I was on the phone, pretending to look for something just to catch fragments of conversation. On Sunday morning, she tried one last time to pull me back. She made pancakes, my favorite, set the table like she used to, even lit a candle. I sat down, ate in silence, thanked her, and got up to leave. "That's it?" she asked, her voice cracking for the first time. "That's it," I said, picking up my jacket. Her eyes glossed over, but no tears fell. She was still holding on to the belief that she could fix this if she just found the right words. What she didn't understand was that there were no words left to give. That afternoon, I moved more of my things into the spare room. Not everything. Just enough for her to notice when she opened the closet. It was a quiet declaration. The separation was no longer emotional. It was physical. By Monday, the calls from her friends had stopped. The casual texts from her family had thinned out. Whether they'd chosen to distance themselves or simply didn't know what to say, the result was the same. Her support network had thinned to nothing. And in that empty space, the weight of her own choices became impossible to ignore. She wasn't just losing me. She was losing the life she'd built on the assumption that I'd always be there to keep it standing. Now, the cracks had spread so far there was no way to hold it together. And I hadn't raised my voice once. It was a Tuesday evening when I decided it was time. Not because of some big fight. Not because of a breaking point. Just because I was ready, and there was nothing left to wait for. I came home early, for once. She was on the couch, blanket around her shoulders, the TV playing to a room she wasn't watching. When I walked in, she looked up like she wanted to say something, then closed her mouth. I went upstairs, opened the closet, and pulled out the rest of my things. Shirts, shoes, the last of my personal items from the bathroom. Everything went into 2 suitcases I'd placed there days ago. She appeared in the doorway, hands gripping the frame. "What are you doing?" I didn't look at her. "Finishing what I started." Her voice wavered. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" "I'm not walking away," I said, zipping the last bag. "I'm leaving a place I'm no longer respected." She stepped into the room, her face tight. "We can fix this." I shook my head once. "You had years to fix it. I had years to try. That's over." I lifted the bags, moved past her, and went downstairs. She followed, her footsteps quick, uneven, like she was trying to catch up to something she'd been ignoring for too long. At the door, I set the bags down and slipped on my jacket. I didn't give her a hug. I didn't offer comfort. Those belonged to a man she'd already pushed away long before tonight. She stood there, waiting for me to look back. I didn't. I opened the door, felt the cool night air against my face, and stepped outside. Halfway down the walkway, I paused. Not for her, but for me. I turned just enough to meet her eyes one last time. I didn't disappear, I said, my voice steady. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. The only sound was the faint hum of the streetlights overhead. I picked up my bags, walked to the car, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine came to life with a low rumble. In the rearview mirror, I saw her still standing in the doorway, the lights spilling out behind her, her figure small against the night. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. Because that's what happens when you've already left long before you walk out the door. And this time, I wasn't coming back. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.